We'll call to order the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology for our legislative hearing on FCC reauthorization, improving Commission transparency. I want to welcome our witnesses today and appreciate your being here. Our subcommittee, often on a bipartisan basis, has worked to make the Federal Communications Commission a more transparent and accountable public policy for many years and under various FCC chairmen. These bills, sponsored by my colleagues, continue those well-meaning efforts to make even powerful bureaucrats realize that this is the public's business that's being conducted. The FCC is not some venture capital firm. The FCC is an independent agency that reports to Congress. Commissioner O'Reilly, thank you for your well-reasoned and helpful testimony. I appreciate your insights, tone, and suggestions. You seem to understand the proper role of the FCC and welcome the opportunity to improve how it functions so that it can better serve the public. I commend you for your views and your willingness to work with this subcommittee. You've pointed out material problems at the FCC, and you've offered constructive solutions, and I thank you for that. Now, I wish I could say the same thing about Chairman Wheeler's testimony. If you really think that drafting, amending, and adopting rules without giving the public more opportunity to see them before they're crammed down their throats is a good process, then maybe it's no wonder the public has little faith in the agencies of government. Under the current power structure at the FCC, the chairman has incredible authority that none of the other commissioners has, because the chairman alone controls access to FCC information. He or she can call in their own validators to get the inside track and become a well-tuned chorus of support for their pet policies. Friends of the chairman get special perks to weigh in and access information that the rest of the public just doesn't get to see, and that other commissioners can't even discuss. Commissioner O'Reilly exposes this charade for what it is in his testimony. None of us on this committee would tolerate that insult to our First Amendment rights that the commissioners at the FCC must suffer at the hands of a chairman. Chairman Wheeler urges us to not make the FCC subject to its own special set of rules. This is a refrain I've heard from some of my colleagues who want to expand the Commission's private discussions, a special rule that would only apply to the FCC, but oppose making the Commission's actions more public. If the chairman would like to subject the FCC to the same rules as the other agencies of the federal government, why, we can certainly make that happen. Of course, that would mean the chairman could no longer handpick the agency's inspector general or have the IG report to the chairman. We'd have real independence in the IG's office. And under the rules that other agencies follow, we wouldn't have this silly argument over producing cost-benefit analyses for rulemakings. The FCC would simply have to follow the law and produce them, like other agencies. Trying to hide behind the skirt of the APA and then pretend the FCC is just another federal agency actually insults this committee. And I cannot help but respond to the nonsense that my colleagues' legislation would somehow unduly burden the FCC by requiring it to link a document that already exists to its website. Such a requirement wasn't considered a burden when the FCC forced broadcasters to scan their political files and make them available on the internet. But now we're supposed to believe that a similar requirement for an agency with 1,700 employees is just too much of a burden. Really? The FCC loves to come up to Capitol Hill and tell us how they're special because they have a public interest mandate. That mandate is a double-edged sword, which means you're stuck with both the rights and the attendant obligations. So I can't for the life of me come up with legitimate rationale for how it's in the public interest to operate in secret, specifically excluding the public from the rules you're considering. My colleagues who wrote these measures and I are on the side of reforming the Washington bureaucracy. It's disappointing to see that you don't share our commitment to better government. We believe the public deserves more access to the process. We believe the public's best served by an open, transparent, and accountable government, and we will not stop in our cause and quest, even if that means taking on the entrenched and powerful. We have only just begun. I yield the remainder of my time to the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee, Mr. Latta, for any comments he'd like to make.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding today's hearing. As the subcommittee continues to examine the reauthorization of the FCC, I remain firm in my belief that given the Commission's integral role in our marketplace, it is critical that the agency is accountable, efficient, and transparent. Therefore, I'm pleased that we have the opportunity to openly discuss the three transparency draft bills in front of us today, one of which I am the sponsor. My discussion draft will require the FCC to identify and describe all items to be adopted by the Commission staff on delegated authority prior to action being taken. This is necessary to prevent abuse of delegated authority and increase public awareness of the agency's day-to-day decisions. The remaining drafts are also vital to promote effective and transparent processes at the FCC, and I look forward to hearing the Commission's view on these bills and how Congress can work with the agency to ensure a level of transparency the American people deserve. And, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the time. Before I recognize the gentlelady from California, I'd like to enter into the record a letter from Coalition of Public Interest Groups, including Center for Democracy and Technology, Center for Media Justice / Magnet, Color of Change, Common Cause, Consumers Union, Demand Progress Engine, Fight for the Future, Free Press Action Fund, National Hispanic Media Coalition, Open Technology Institute of New America, Public Knowledge, United Church of Christ, OC, Inc., Writers Guild of America West, opposing the three bills offered by Representatives Latta, Kinzinger, and Elmers. Ironically, it seems that public knowledge is opposed to making knowledge public. To give you an idea what opponents these bills are supporting, I'd like to read an excerpt. This group opposes Rep. Elmer's bill because it would, and I quote, essentially require finalized text at the time of a vote, close quote. Apparently supporting the idea that commissioners of the FCC shouldn't have access to a final version of the item before they vote. This enters without objection. Now recognize the gentlelady from California, my friend Ms. Eshoo, for opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the distinguished chairman of the FCC and to Commissioner O'Reilly. It's wonderful to see you. Mr. Chairman, I just want to depart for a moment from what I have here to say in my opening statement. I always think of you as a gentleman. I mean, we're friends. We agree on some things. We disagree on other things. But I hope that we can just stay away from using terms like the chairman's charade. These are people that have entered public service to serve the people of our country. I know that your side is adamantly opposed to what the FCC on a majority vote placed before the American people and us on net neutrality. It's a fair fight. I want to win, you want to win. We have our very specific reasons around this, and we fight hard, but we need to fight fair. I don't agree with Commissioner Pai. He's a friend of mine. Commissioner O'Reilly, I don't know all that well, but I look forward to every time I see him and building a professional relationship. In so many ways, we're all in this together. So, you know, to say that we're welcoming the chairman and using him as a piñata, I think I'd rather be on the welcoming side, and I think that you at heart would too. So let's just take a deep breath and be very respectful of one another. We can disagree. It's okay. It's all right. We're going to fight like hell for our own view. I know today's hearing is about process reform. I don't agree with the bills that you're putting forward. I think that they're going to tie the agency in knots by undermining established Administrative Procedure Act precedents. And I think that it will jeopardize regulatory certainty, and I think it's going to open the door to just a mess of legal challenges. So that's what I think. I think if our overall goal is reform, and I can tell you that the members on my side are sincerely prepared to offer constructive reform ideas, not retribution for net neutrality and what someone's position is on it. We're going to work on reforms. Let's work on reforms. We have, I think, two solid ones. One of them is to upgrade the FCC's multi-line phone systems to provide the direct dialing to 911. This is something that Commissioner Pai has spoken to, and I think that the FCC should lead on this, that the agency that regulates others, that this would set a great example, and I think that that should be done. The other FCC process reform are the efficiencies and collaboration amongst the commissioners themselves. We've done it before. It's been bipartisan. It's been bicameral. and that is the Collaboration Act. And we'll have some more ideas, Mr. Chairman, and we look forward to offering them. Now, I have a minute and 21 seconds. I want to yield, split that between Congresswoman Matsui, so we'll go women first, and then to Mr. Yarmouth. Thank you.
I thank the ranking member for yielding me time. I'd like to welcome both of you here today. The issue of FCC process reform is an important one. It should also be bipartisan in nature. We can all agree that transparency and efficiency at the FCC is a good thing. I have put forth a draft bill to make it easier for small businesses in Sacramento and across the country to engage with the FCC on policies that may impact them. The FCC oversees industries that account for 1/6 of the economy, which includes countless small businesses. Whether it's a family business or a startup, small businesses can't spend scarce resources on lawyers or lobbyists to have impact on FCC reforms. We should make it as simple as possible for the small businesses to have their voices heard at the FCC. This is a common sense bill, and I hope my colleagues will support it. And I yield the rest of the time to my colleague.
Thank you. I will elaborate on this later in the hearing if I have time, but I'm very concerned about transparency at the FCC, but I'm also very concerned about transparency with the ads that fill our airwaves every election season and even now after election season. So I introduced today the Keeping Our Campaigns Honest Act, legislation requiring the FCC to revise their sponsorship identification rules to take in super PACs and 501c4 organizations. We need to make sure that there is sunlight on these donors until the IRS issues a clearer ruling. So I appreciate the opportunity to just mention that that's something I want to talk about in the future with the FCC and the committee. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady's time's expired. Recognize the Vice Chair of the full committee, Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do want to welcome our witnesses. We appreciate that you are here and that we have the opportunity to begin to look at FCC reform. And I am also hopeful that we're going to see participation in this on a bipartisan basis. I do believe that it is time for us to look at some reforms. Transparency, accountability, you've heard it from everyone who has spoken, and it's something that we think the FCC is struggling with. And therefore, we want to put it on the table and have a discussion with you as we look at how we reform the way that business is done at the FCC. Taxpayers are telling us they don't want this to be a struggle. They want you all to act in a more transparent and accountable method, and we have to realize that the rules you make do impact them. They impact the economy. They impact participation by the private sector. They also impact the tax burden that our constituents feel when they go to write that check every April. So yes, we are going to continue to look at these, and we are hopeful that you're going to be proactive in working with us as we bring forward some proposals that will bring about a bit more accountability and transparency. One of the reasons that we are going about this is because of the opaque process, which I think surrounded the net neutrality rules and really damaged the credibility of the Commission. That is something that is regrettable, and we should not have to see things passed in order to find out what is in them. And we want to work with you on making certain things are more transparent. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I yield 30 seconds to you.
I thank the gentlelady, and I want to just go back and read what I actually said in my statement, because this was not aimed at any particular chairman. And I will read it again. Under the current power structure at the FCC, the chairman has incredible authority that none of the other commissioners has. That is a fact. Because the chairman alone controls access to information. That is a fact. He or she can call in their own validators, get the inside track, and become a well-tuned chorus of support for their pet projects. That's a fact. Friends of the chairman do get special perks to weigh in and access information that the rest of the public doesn't get to see and that other commissioners can't even discuss. And that goes on for there. This was not aimed at any specific chairman, just to set the record straight. And I do appreciate my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are interested in working on reform efforts. As you know, our legislation from my colleagues has been posted online and available, and we are open to these discussions. I read the press release today and saw the bills that you all have filed today. We're open to this discussion and look forward to working with you. And just as a final point, we've actually been on this effort since I began as chairman here to try and reform the FCC, irrespective of any policy before the FCC at the time or who the chairman is. I think we can do better in Washington to bring about transparency, openness, and accountability in every agency. This is the one over which we have jurisdiction. With that, I'll yield to the gentlelady. I'll yield back to the gentlelady from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the clarity that you brought to that and the repetition of your statement. And at this time, I yield the remainder of the time to Ms. Elmers.
Thank you to my colleague. And I would just like to say that absolutely, this is about transparency. This is about an open process. I think we all on both sides of the aisle are trying to see the way to that goal. And so we do have questions about the way the process is being put forward. We do have good questions about the plan of action. And I am just thankful to the chairman that we have the opportunity today to discuss these things and get them out on the table so that we can move forward on an open and transparent process, as I think all Americans believe.
And the gentlelady yields back, and I, Mr. Chairman, will yield back the balance of my time to you again. I thank the commissioners for submitting their testimony, and I look forward to bipartisan participation on reforming the FCC.
And I thank the gentlelady, and I just want to point out this has nothing to do with either net neutrality or the fact that Ohio State demolished my ducks. Now, with that, I turn to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the chairman and welcome Chairman Wheeler and Commissioner O'Reilly. I know you were sitting in these same seats just a few weeks ago, and we appreciate you coming back. I just want to associate myself with the remarks that Ms. Eshoo made about, let's be careful. I think things have calmed down a little here, but I think she was right in saying that let's be careful that we don't, pick apart or insult the chairman or the FCC or any agency, really, because everybody's trying to do the best they can. And I don't necessarily think agencies are better than Congress or worse than Congress or better than the president or whatever. And I know that you said, I appreciate your comment, Mr. Chairman, about this not being a backhanded slap at the FCC for adopting the strong network neutrality protections. A lot of us obviously are concerned that that not be the case, so it's good that you set that forth. I am obviously supportive of having a debate about whether we should modify procedures across all agencies, but I am worried that these kinds of agency-specific procedural changes have several drawbacks. First, they can give the public the impression that these are simply backdoor efforts to undermine popular decisions with which some members of Congress disagree. Second, legal experts have repeatedly told us that agency-specific requirements invite lawsuits. They have explained that even small changes create large conflicts with long-standing legal precedent, and these conflicts will no doubt lead to drawn-out battles in court. And as we've heard over and over in this subcommittee, litigation unsettles the market and deters investment. But despite Democratic concerns with the Republican-specific bills, Democrats are not the party of no, and that's why, as the chairman mentioned, the Democratic members of this subcommittee have put together our own plan, one that builds on the good work Chairman Wheeler has already done to improve the FCC's processes and will keep future FCC administrations fast, efficient, and transparent. Our common sense proposals would keep the FCC as agile as the industries it regulates without sparking years of legal uncertainty. And our plan goes beyond the bureaucratic inner workings of the SEC. We believe that transparency should extend to the political process as well. And that's why the Democratic plan includes a way to ensure that the public knows who's paying for expensive political ads on TV. For too long, mega donors have been hiding behind the innocuous and misleading titles of their super PACs. Americans deserve to know who is using the public airwaves to influence political debates, and transparency should not stop at the doors of the FCC. So I'm hopeful that that we don't see any more political tactics against the FCC and that they end today. I'd like to, I have 2 minutes. I'd like to yield 1 minute to Ms. Clark and 1 minute to Mr. Loebsack, in that order.
Chairman Walden, Ranking Member SU, thanks for convening this hearing. And to Chairman Wheeler, Commissioner O'Reilly, thank you for appearing here today. I'd like to also thank Ranking Member Pallone for yielding time. The FCC oversees many dynamic industry sectors that make up 1/6 of our national economy. Consequently, it's important for government to understand and act quickly to keep up with the rapid innovation and shifts affecting these industries. Whether it's application for a license or a request for new rules, the public deserves timely responses from the FCC. There are some issues and tasks at the agency that have simply taken more priority over others, years to complete, and we must avoid these time hogs, if you will, that prohibit other business from getting done. Essentially, we need the FCC to effectively multitask while maintaining clear transparency around timelines to keep up with its broad portfolio of work. The agency's delay, for example, on the rulemaking or a petition can have a negative impact on the commenter, whose next step or survival is intricately tied to the timeliness of the agency's response. I know the Commission is working hard to speed its decision-making, but the best way to ensure that future administrations live up to this standard is to hold them accountable to the public they serve. I'll be introducing a draft bill that will make data regarding the timeliness of the business before the FCC available to the public. It would also include information about the impact of congressional investigations on the agency's ability to manage its workload. I look forward to working with my colleagues and the FCC on these issues, and I yield to Mr. Loebsack.
Thank you, and thank you, Ranking Member Pallone, for allowing me to speak briefly, and thanks to both of you for being here today as well. I've just joined this committee, this Congress, but I know that this issue of FCC reform transparency, namely transparency, is something that the committee has been examining for several Congresses. Unfortunately, we all know it's become a very partisan issue. The FCC and all our federal agencies need to be transparent. I think we can all agree on that. They need to be responsive to the American people. This really should be something that's easy for Democrats and Republicans to agree on. And I think we've seen that today already demonstrated by the comments of my colleagues. That's why I'm offering a discussion draft today to shine some light, at least, on the way the FCC makes decisions. My bill simply would require the FCC chairman to post online the guidelines and procedures that commissioners use when considering items. Fairly simple. Commissioner O'Reilly, you've raised this issue at the FCC, and I agree with you on this common sense reform. Public participation, I think we all know, has never been higher when it comes to engaging the FCC. Millions of Americans have reached out to the FCC, and they deserve to know how decisions are made by the agency. So I look forward to working with my fellow colleagues here on the Energy and Commerce Committee to bring the clarity I think that we all want when it comes to what the FCC rules and regulations are, and making sure that the public knows what they are as well. So thanks again for letting me speak to all the folks here who are in leadership positions on this committee and the subcommittee, and thanks to both of you as well, and I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his negative time there, but we're happy to have that. And I would just comment, they've called votes, so we may wait. I assume that's votes, right? And I would just tell Ms. Clark, Loebsack, and Matsui, I've just seen these bills for the first time today, and I think your ideas make a lot of sense. And so we're open to having that discussion and incorporating them in, or see what we can come together with. And I hope you'll join me that when we do that, bringing commissioners back, chairman back to give us the input once we get a draft put together. So I'd like to work with you on that. It's great. With that, I think we will recess and then hear from the chairman and the commissioner when we return from vote. So if members could go vote and come right back.
Charles to close the loop on yesterday? Oh, we can call John if you want. Yeah, would you mind if we had John involved, David?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we can go grab do a quick call. You have 2 seconds? Yeah, of course. Yeah.